How's it going, everybody? So today we'll be doing our discussion on ethics and what we believe our definition of ethics are, and how people perceive ethics in the public, and how it pertains to leadership and how it affects ethics affect leadership. So for me personally, my definition of ethics is a person's values. Book uses morals, but I think values is um, better suited for it. Just because, I mean, however, it's how people think. I mean, their head, and if you're not thinking clearly, like, then you're gonna have bad ethics. Obviously, you're not gonna make correct decisions. You're gonna look out for yourself and not what's best for everybody else's, which goes into how people perceive them in the public eye and how it affects everybody, how ethics affect people for being a leader. What does everybody else think?
I'm going to tag in there on the value aspect. It's definitely values. When I think of the values, I think of what you can bring to the table, what you find important. And just like you said, it's not necessarily figuring out what's the most important for me, but it's what's most important for the company. Having whatever bad morals or negative morals can destroy a company or destroy a leader rather quickly. And all it takes is one thing. One thing is enough to just ruin that trust for everybody, not just the people you work with, but an entire image and an entire company. So definitely thinking about what is valuable to me and what value my decisions or my ethics bring to the company is what I definitely think is probably the most important aspect.
I have to agree with you there. I mean, the whole point of leadership is, to create a collaborative effort between groups and between people. And if you don't have ethics to follow, and you show that you don't follow those ethics, and you have a fall through, then all that trust that you've built up is completely broken, and no one wants to collaborate anymore. No one can trust you to be a leader because you don't have any ethics to follow. No one wants to follow you off the edge of the cliff, so to speak. They want to follow a leader that's going to be a strong leader. And if you don't have ethics, I think ethics and leadership are hand in hand. They are synonymous. To be a leader, you have to have ethics. And if they don't go hand in hand, then you're not a leader.
Absolutely. You guys have covered some really good points, including values and trust. And I think another one that's really big too is responsibility. Not to sound silly, but like the movie Spider-Man, his quote is always, "With great power comes great responsibility." And I think that applies to any type of leadership position, whether, it's the president of the United States, or it's a doctor, or it's an executive leader in a business or an organization. Having the people entrust them is not only beneficial, but it's vital, to the success of everyone. If you think about the information, the privilege that they have as leaders. I mean, the minute that they start lying, what do? It damages their character and it destroys their trust. And, as stated in the book, I mean, having that kind of power, it means that they have great responsibility, and their main responsibility is to make sure that the well-being of everyone else, not just including themselves, is looked after.
That's something that I completely agree with you. I think servant leadership, I mean, that it talks about that in the textbook as well. Servant leadership to me is what really should be what leaders strive for. You want to do what's best for your followers, and not having ethics is not what's best. You need to have ethics to do what's best, to make sure that you're putting your best foot forward and leading people to a good place instead of, again, off the edge of a cliff. I like that saying.
I think something else that I was just thinking about while I was here is in my working relationship with my bosses in the past, everybody always likes to say, Rome wasn't built in a day. One leader didn't just step in and build Rome overnight. That's not how it happened. It took a leader who had ethics and morals to build a foundation that built Rome upwards and outwards. And then, just like we've learned in all the other chapters of the book, is that they then teach the people that are coming in to become leaders, and they teach themselves out of a job, and they move on and they go up higher, and those new leaders then have the morals and values entrusted in them so that they can then pass it on. And that's how a company grows, is it goes over and over, and that process continues to build. And if one person in that chain is weak and has bad morals, it will completely break everything apart. So definitely think that's kind of how the whole process works for me. So
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, that goes, what goes hand in hand with what you just said is essentially having credibility. You know, knowing that people can trust you for not only the words and the things that you say, but also your actions. You know, I mean, that's just so important, especially having like a leadership position. I mean, if you don't do what you say, or you don't say what you do, I mean, no one's going to take you serious. No one's going to trust you. No one's going to entrust their trust in you. I know I wouldn't.
Absolutely. That's just like the book said, and that's going into public leadership and how people perceive, the people perceive leaders, like you guys all said. For example, like the book used the Ford Motor Company and the cars where they had negative ethics, which is still surprising that they are still in business and doing well as they are, when if you look back in, it was 1980s when they quit making the Ford Pinto. They decided to take people's lawsuits. They valued everybody's life at 200,000 instead of doing a recall, which there's your negative ethics right there. I mean, that's definitely looking the opposite way instead of doing the right thing. And yet they're still profiting because they stopped doing it, and now they're actually back on track and they're actually following through with safety over first.
I thought an interesting aspect of the public leadership too, at the beginning of chapter 9, it talks about public relations. And I actually work in public relations, so a lot of this hit a note with me. And, you know, with what we do in our field, we really do have to have a strong ethical standard. We can't provide information to the media or to people that is inaccurate or is negative, not negative, but is not correct, because doing so, even if we don't actually work for the company, it will hurt the company's image, and it will hurt what people see as the company, the public image that that company has. And we have to be really careful to keep those relationships. And the book mentions this as well. We have to have those relationships, those ethical relationships with the media. We have to prove to them that we're going to give them the correct information. And maybe we'll want to spin it in a positive light, like, yeah, okay, a couple people died, but you know, there's also this other stuff going on, something like that. But we're not going to change that information, because that would be unethical. Trying to bring a different light to it is different, but changing the information is something that is a definite no-no. That is a hard rule that we do not do that in our field. So
yeah, so I think overall, I think that being open and being transparent as a public organization, or being as a leader within an organization, is definitely the best moral practice. I think sweeping it under the rug, or doing as Ford did, of just kind of turning a blind eye and saying, well, we'll see what happens, and if people die, oh well, we'll handle it when that comes, because that's definitely just not the best thing to do. We're all pretty common sense people here, and I think that none of us would definitely think of it that way, and we would definitely try to go about it in the best way possible by doing what's best amongst our customers, because we understand that that's going to bring more support and more growth to the company, rather than saying, well, let's see what happens. Because honestly, I'm 28 years old and I've never heard of this Pinto case until I read the book. And I've had a number of Ford vehicles in my life. I've had people that have given them to me. I've bought a Ford vehicle, and would probably not have done so had I known this at the time. Because you know what? That's what the media does. They sweep it away. They cover it up with other stories. They bring to light the positive, the new safety things. But you know what? If they did it then, what keeps them from doing it now? And what keeps them from maybe lying to us now and having those bad morals and ethics that can definitely ruin a company. That's just not something that's cool in my opinion.
Well, additionally, I don't know if you guys recall reading the story in our text too about the way that the Chilean president executed, helping 33 miners, I think it was, to go save them, and despite opposition and other political leaders and other people who had input on it were discouraging him. Saying, well, what's the point of saving these 33 miners if you're putting other people's lives at risk? And I think it was only like a 3%. There was only 3% chance that they could save these miners, but regardless, the Chilean president went ahead and did it anyway and ended up saving all of them. And I mean, the text describes how he basically just didn't go by instinct, but to a certain degree, you kind of do, because you've got to say, hey, you know what? I'm here to save lives. And, when it comes to lives, I mean, there shouldn't be even a dispute. Being ethical shouldn't even be.
You hit yourself on mute there.
Oops.
Sorry. That's all good.
But yeah, so in conclusion, when it comes to saving lives, then it shouldn't be even an issue for anyone to even think twice about, executing something. If someone's life is at stake, I mean, why not?
Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
Oh,
Go ahead, Tayler.
sorry. I want to
you're fine.
respond to you guys too, because I definitely see where you guys are coming from. And I know I think I did a bad job explaining it too. Like, definitely we wouldn't be like, oh, so what if people died? Like, not a big deal. I think it's more of a, yes, this negative thing happened, but this is what's being implemented, or this is what's going on in the background to try to rectify that, or to try to make reparations for it. Because what happened, I mean, it's not bad, but I think the big thing that people think of when a company does something, or when someone does something unethical, I think a lot of people focus on what comes after that unethical act, or what happens after that. How does the company, or how does that person respond to that? Do they say, oh my gosh, we totally messed up, we did something unethical, we need to fix it, we admit it? Or do they say, oh, it wasn't a big deal, it was nothing? And I think that in itself also shapes, because I mean, if we're all being honest, I'm sure that we've all had a lapse in ethics at some point in our lives, whether big or small. And I think what matters as a leader is what we did after that. If we own up to it and say, I'm going to fix this, I messed up, guys, I did something bad, I'm going to fix it though, and have accountability for that. Definitely think that that's what matters in the end. So.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more with that 100%. It's definitely accountability is hitting the nail right on the head. You hit it. You can't, without one, you can't have the other. 100% said. Just like to Doug's point with after, I would have, just for the Ford, I own Ford as well. I've always done Ford. I was just looking at a Ford before. I'd never heard this. I'm still now debating on whether I want to, just because Doug said, what's from stopping somebody from doing that again? I definitely can say that with ethics, we all see it is hard for sometimes to make the right decisions, especially when we are, and that's part of ethics and how our values are.
So yeah, excuse me, sorry. So I want to go real quick back to Taylor's point of admitting. I think sometimes the company or an individual leader who has access to finance records, personnel records, personal records, all these things can do a lot of things. And I think that when they make that mistake and admit it, it shows their true character. It doesn't necessarily, you'd still destroy the trust, but maybe you don't destroy it as much. You spent all these years building up that wall of trust, and now maybe a few bricks are knocked out of it. But in the end, it's easier to rebuild those few bricks rather than have to rebuild the whole wall. Where if you kind of just sweep it away, You wait until you get caught. You say, that's a personal file that was 10 years old back in the back. Nobody's ever going to find it. You know, as a leader, that's not cool. We should definitely be the individual that we want our followers to be. And I think that's owning up to our mistakes and taking accountability, and going where we need to go with it. So.
All right. Well, with that being said, like we all said, leadership ethics go hand in hand with leadership. I think that was we can't have one without the other. I think that was a great discussion for today. All right. See you guys later.
Thanks, guys.
Good night.